This is the next in a series of video blogs describing the spokes of the Oyster wheel, featuring spoke 4 from Rye House to Tower Bridge. I will look at the route, highlight any challenges and describe the sights along the way. To link it together, I'm using the Ordnance Survey's fly-through capability, which provides an overview of the route from the air. Spoke 4 follows the Lea Valley Navigation from Rye House to Waltham Abbey, where it joins National Cycle Network Route 1. Apart from a short diversion via Walthamstow Marshes, it follows this to the Olympic Park, Victoria Park, the Regent's Canal and finally Limehouse Basin. Here it takes NCN 13, which it follows to Tower Bridge. It is 40 km long with negligible ascent. Under wheel it is a mixture of tarmac and hard-packed towpath. Note the latter can have deep puddles after rain, especially the section before Broxbourne, which has large potholes requiring care. There are no major roads to be navigated, and smaller ones are mostly by crossings. Overall it's about 3 hours of cycling plus time for stops. The start of the ride is at Rye House, close to where the River Stort meets the River Lea, and from here it descends the Lea Valley to the Thames. The whole area has been a traditional source of drinking water and water power for London since Tudor times. The Stort is 38 km long and the Lea nearly twice that length, and both have been extensively canalised to improve waterborne transport into East London. In more recent times, the waterways and lakes have become leisure facilities, with the result that this line is almost entirely off-road. Just as we start, on the opposite bank of the Lea can be found the Grade 1 listed Rye House Gatehouse. This is all that remains of the 15th century ancestral seat of the Parr family, including Catherine, the sixth and last wife of Henry VIII. More infamously, it was the location of a plot to assassinate Charles II in an ambush on his way back from the Newmarket races. Luckily for him, a fire caused the meeting to abandon and he returned days early. The plotters were caught and executed. The surrounding area is now the Rye Meads RSPB Nature Reserve, consisting of wetlands with flood meadows, reed beds and with wintering wildflower otters and kingfishers. Returning to the Lea, we soon come to Faldes Weirs, where the Stour joins, and then on to Dobbs Weir, famed for the Fish and Eels pub which has stood here since the 1800s. This weir's history is typical of those on the Lea. When it was first documented in 1741, it was a turnpike weir. Boats were pulled up and down a sloping way with a fall of 50 centimetres, and a sixpence toll. Turnpike would be paid if the water was needed to be released to enable it. It was rebuilt in 1767 as a turnpike lock with a fall of 1.5 metres and remained intact until widened in 1922. The route now passes Nazing Meads, 3 large lagoons surrounded by wildflower meadows and woodlands which were historically an airfield, gravel quarries and landfill sites. The land has been reclaimed and now they are a place to fish and sail. This type of regeneration has been key to the creation of the Lea Valley Country Park, an area of 1,000 acres consisting of lakes, watercourses and open spaces, where the remnants of gravel extraction dating from the 1930s onwards have been turned into public spaces for walking, cycling and nature discovery. Nowadays SSIs such as the 428 acres at Cheshunt attract wildflower, dragonflies, otters and grass snakes. Heading on we pass Broxbourne, whose Domesday Book Mill unfortunately burnt down in 1949, and then follow the River Lea Navigation, which was the first river to be improved for navigation in England, requiring an Act of Parliament in 1422, and which allowed dredging and the recoupment of costs through tolls. By 1571 the river was so important for the supply of grain to London that a further act was authorised which allowed new cuts to be constructed to bypass obstructions and a lock, the first on a river in England, and weirs to control depth. Conflict between the supply of drinking water to London and the need for water to power mills and float boats led to a new design in 1767, which was completed by 1790 and included 18 kilometres of new cuts and 12 new locks. This Lea navigation remained broadly in place until widening for larger barges in the early 20th century. However, competition from roads and railways caused commercial traffic to cease in the 1980s. After 11 kilometres we pass under the M25 on the outskirts of Waltham Abbey and continue south to Enfield Island. This was the former site of the Royal Small Arms Factory and produced British military rifles, muskets and swords from 1816 until 1988, giving its name to the standard issue Enfield rifle. Nowadays the site hosts housing and small businesses, although the nearby Gunpowder Park, where testing ranges were sited, can be explored with its visitor centre. The route is now overshadowed by a series of fused reservoirs which are part of the Lea Valley reservoir chain, supplying London with drinking water. The first two Chingford reservoirs, built between 1912 and 1951, cover between them 750 acres and hold 7 billion gallons of water. Heading onwards, we come next to Tottenham Marshes, a small semi-natural wetland supporting voles and orchids, which was actually the location of Tottenham Hotspur's first football pitches, marking out their lines on public land from 1882 to 1888. Here, after 21 kilometres, we briefly leave NCN1 to explore the Walthamstow wetlands, which comprise 520 acres with 10 reservoirs, and which, when it opened in 2017, was one of the largest urban wetland nature reserves in Europe. The original engine house has been repurposed as an excellent cafe and visitor centre, and at the south end is the Grade 2 listed copper mill, built in 1806 on the site of earlier mills, and which has produced paper, gunpowder and leather. Back on NCM1 we pass through Walthamstow Marshes, which have been managed as lammas land for centuries. This traditional form of rights allowed commoners to graze cattle on the land after hay had been harvested, traditionally on Lammas Day in August. Similar rights also pertain to Hackney Marshes, which are reached at 28 kilometres. However, increasing conflict with recreation caused them to be bought by London County Council in 1890. Now the 88 full-size football pitches are famed as the breeding ground for future England football talent. Soon the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is reached. This area was previously a mixture of greenfield and brownfield wasteland and was redeveloped by the Olympic Delivery Authority to support the main venues for the 2012 Olympic Games. The waterways were dredged and cleaned, and the public spaces turned into parkland and decorative flower beds. The sporting footprint still remains, with the main stadium being used by West Ham for football as well as athletics events, the aquatic centre providing both public and sports swimming, and the velodrome hosting World Cup cycling. There are also regular events in the indoor copper box arena and on the outdoor hockey pitches. Here the route leaves the Lea Navigation, taking the short Hertford Union Canal into Victoria Park. Its 213 acres opened to the public in 1845, having originally been the site of Bonner's Hall, a residence of the Bishop of London. It was designed to be a people's park with essential amenities for the working classes of the East End. It contained a bathing pond and boating lakes, and included a Chinese pagoda moved from Hyde Park and an ornate fountain. It had a tradition of public speaking with many political rallies and a lively speaker's corner. During World War II, the park was closed and became an anti-aircraft battery. As a result, many of its buildings were damaged and subsequently pulled down. Since 2010, a large lottery grant has supported renovations, and its cafes are popular throughout the year. On leaving the park, we join the towpath of the Regent's Canal, which connects Limehouse Basin on the Thames with Little Venice and the Paddington arm of the Grand Union Canal for routes north. This was opened between 1816 and 1820 and was part of a scheme to redevelop central North London, including Regent's Park, alongside which the canal ran. Although it was expected to be used for long-distance freight, in practice it tended only to carry local traffic, in particular supplying coal to the gasworks along the canal. At its end is Limehouse Basin, which was designed as the offloading point between seagoing vessels and canal barges, and which at one point was the main entrance to Britain's canal network, until the larger size of newer steamships made it obsolete. Here the route picks up NCN 13, see Spoke 5 and 6, and follows it through Wapping, which existed as a distinct maritime community until squeezed out by the docks and associated warehouses that were built in the 19th century. The district was devastated by World War II bombing, and the subsequent closure of the docks ensured it remained derelict until redevelopment in the 1980s. Today the only evidence of its history are the waterside pubs such as the Prospect of Whitby and the Waterman's Stairs that give access to the foreshore. On reaching Shadwell Basin we enter the old London docks, which occupied 30 acres and specialised in luxury commodities such as ivory, spices, coffee and tobacco. When the docks closed they were filled in and became housing and commercial properties, although the old dock wall can still be seen alongside the southern edge of the canal, just before it comes out into Hermitage Basin. The route then skirts around the edge of the final dock, St Catherine, built by Thomas Telford in 1827, but which was a commercial failure due to its smaller size. It is now private housing and restaurants, together with a thriving marina. Route 13 then finishes at the base of Tower Bridge opposite the entrance to the Tower of London, and here the tour ends. I hope you've enjoyed this ride along the River Lea and its associated canals and reservoirs. I produced this guide with the aim of raising money for pancreatic cancer, so if you've liked the route then please consider donating to my Just Giving page.